Right, we're all launching into this. So welcome. This is a workshop we're having on the Oamaru Airport Strategy and Business Plan. And I just want to probably start by passing to Councillor Fellning, who's got something to declare in that space.
Yeah, no, as the Chief Flight Instructor at the Aero Club, I'm conflicted in this workshop, so I'm going to step out. In that way, there won't be any conflict.
Fantastic. We'll see you later. So yeah, basically I'll just pass straight on to Alex.
Thank you. I'll do a brief intro to this. What you have before you is a really important document. I think a really well-crafted document, but getting your feedback on it is important. And I'll just roll back 4.5 years ago when I arrived in Waitaki. And one of the things I did in my first week is I went out with the mayor and the chair of the assets committee to the airport in that first week and met some of the stakeholders out there, including Sven. And it was obvious to me then that what we have at the airport is a really great community and economic asset that has unrealized potential. And that we needed to take more of a commercial approach to that. And we started down that route, but we had some things that prevented us fully realising that, and this is the opportunity to reset. But the things that prevented us were essentially the safety issues out there that were being raised by the CAA. And so whilst previous council had looked at a business plan and a master plan, essentially we had to put that on hold whilst we sorted out the safety issues in the aeronautical study out there. But also I think an important issue in this is that if we're going to be commercial, we need to have the will to do the things that are necessary to be commercial. So I think sometimes it's an issue in councils that we want the commercial benefits, but we're not always willing to do the things that we need to do to be commercial. And within this plan, you'll see that there are things that are needed to change out there in our approach, and there'll be potentially investments in there if we're going to realise the commercial opportunities. And so I think that's something I wanted to include in terms of the introduction, because 4.5 years on, we haven't realised the full economic and commercial potential of the airport. And this is the opportunity to do it, but we need to have the will to do the things differently that are set out in this plan to do that. And that needs governance support to be able to achieve that. So I'll hand over to Joe, who is director of this work, and then Matthew.
I would just add to that opening really that in the relative short period of time that Matt's actually been with us, it's fantastic to see that such great strategic perspective has been brought to the airport, and certainly from this extensive document, the opportunities that we have. So I just want to thank Matt for the work that he's done and the opportunities that he's highlighting, and hope that this will enable us to have a springboard forward to create a commerciality at the airport. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and councillors. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a waffle first, because there's a few ground rules for this workshop and a few things that I couldn't put into the brief. The purpose of today's workshop is to have a joint discussion on the strategic direction for Oamaru Airport and the proposed adoption of the airport strategy and development business plan. It is important to be clear from the outset. This is about setting the strategic direction, not approving individual projects. The opportunities outlined in this plan are ideas and potential pathways at this stage only. They're not being presented today as confirmed proposals, nor do they commit council to specific investment. Any individual project, financial commitment, or development opportunity would still need to come back through the appropriate channels, including the master plan, feasibility studies, and business cases, and future council decision-making processes. Today, the main focus is on the proposed governance structure and how information will flow between staff, the airport board, and council. This is to ensure that everyone understands how the ideas will be reviewed, tested, reported on, and brought back to council for decisions. Importantly, this workshop also provides the opportunity for officers to ask questions of elected members. On page 2 of the agenda, you'll see the discussion points I wish to raise. These are intended to help us understand the direction elected members would like to see for the airport, the level of ambition the council has, and the size of commitment council is prepared to consider as this work progresses. This way, we're all working off the same page. At the heart of it, This plan is about recognising Oamaru Airport as far more than an aviation facility. It is a major community enabler. It supports and has potential to support emergency response, medical flights, commercial activity, tourism, logistics, training, and future opportunities that may not yet be fully realised. It is also a significant council-owned asset with underutilised potential. The challenge before us is how we extract the greatest value from that asset for the best possible community outcomes without unnecessarily placing further debt burden on ratepayers. The proposed approach is to shift the airport from being viewed as a cost centre to being developed as a commercially sustainable, strategically important regional hub. This does not mean chasing every opportunity at once, nor does it mean committing council to major spending today. It means setting a clear direction, investigating opportunities properly, and making staged, evidence-based decisions as demand, partnerships, and business cases are developed. This draft plan is deliberately clear and transparent. It does not only highlight the potential rewards, it also identifies the risks, the limitations, and the infrastructure constraints, and commercial realities associated with each proposal. This is important because it gives the council a realistic basis for discussion rather than an overly optimistic one. A key feature of this plan is that it cannot and should not be driven by officers alone. The future of the airport needs to be developed through a genuine team approach, officers working with governance, council working with local businesses, and the wider community, helping shape opportunities that deliver wider community benefits. So today's discussion is really about whether council supports that strategic direction, has the confidence to formalise this plan, and with any requested changes at the council meeting on the 23rd of June 2026, support progressing this to the next stage of work. Subject to the feedback received from this workshop, my intention is on the 23rd of June, I will be recommending and seeking approval from councillors as set out on page 35 of the agenda. Ultimately, this is about developing Oamaru Airport as a whole of community opportunity for a whole of community benefit in the most cost-effective and financially responsible way possible. I'll now take it as read and fire your questions.
You, Ryan.
Thank you, and thank you, Matt, for the work that you've done on this. Yeah, it's great to see vision and ambition and opportunities out there. I guess just for me, I'm wondering, I guess the hesitation I have about progressing this any further at this point is all the discussion around the finances at the airport are, just, I guess, a few sentences in the strategy rather than us actually having a good look at what the financial situation is. And when we're talking about commercial growth and I guess what a sustainable post NZAA kind of model looks like, I want to get a better understanding of what that looks like. I guess for a long time we've been told that a lot of the costs associated with the airport are because of the demands that the Airline Academy has put on us in terms of compliance and everything else that's associated with that. So I guess if that's the case, what does that actually look like? What's our new baseline? And I guess, if we're talking about strategy, should we not have a really close and more detailed look at the finances before we're stepping into that space? I guess that's question one. And then I also just wanted to get a better understanding of how the ring fencing of the financing actually works too, because if we're talking about commercial growth and income generation, how we can actually get that back into the community if it is ring fenced for the airport, or what that process looks like. Sorry, that's a lot to put into one, but if you could.
I deliberately kept the financials out of this, right? Because we could bury ourselves in an hour or 2 hour long conversation on that. What I'm asking for here is, as I said, we're looking, part of the strategy is the governance structure, how we do things. Those conversations about finances will come later on when we start actually putting a master plan together and going, right, well, how do we trade our way out of this and stuff like that? So, I tried to avoid talking about finances because I didn't want to get buried in that today. Otherwise, we'd get derailed from this.
And I guess just to round that off, that maybe it's not a discussion for today, but maybe it's something we need to do before we can land this one so that people feel like they've got a bit of a clarity and oversight in that space. Now, I had a few. I'll start with Councillor Lewis, then Councillor McCone.
Thanks, Mayor Taventel. Through the chair, thanks, Matt, for all the work on this. It's interesting you've identified logistics and warehousing and that kind of thing there. Before the first sod was turned on the North End Business Park, I remember thinking we should be utilising our location as an advantage for that kind of thing. And so it's good to see that in there. I think one of the things that I have is that there needs to be a clear direction with regards to opportunity and which ones we pursue, because some are potentially going to be counterproductive to another. For example, the busier the airspace is, the less ability there is to do other things and those sort of things. Is there a sort of a plan? I know that you're looking at the structure and things like that, but is there an area that you've identified so far that actually would yield the best opportunity with a pathway for expansion going forwards in a particular sort of sector or area?
Not at the moment, because obviously with world politics the way it is at the moment, things are a bit up in the air. Aviation, like 6 months ago, I would have said there's something there in aviation. At the present, not so much. Obviously with the cost of jet fuel and stuff like that. And I think that's where we need to build an airport that doesn't get hit with these bumps. You know, we need to diversify basically, with multiple different streams coming in. So freight, back then freight was the big one. You know, with the future of aviation in New Zealand, the potential of these smaller electric aircraft coming in and they're using them for cargo. And then look, let's talk blue sky, autonomous. You know, flying an autonomous cargo plane up and down the country. They don't have range. It was identified in a report by WSP about the future of aviation that, and it specifically mentioned Oamaru as potentially re-emerging as a hub for regional transport and cargo because of the limitations on some of these new aircraft designs that are coming through. So yeah, it's, again, that's why I've said here, none of these ideas are concrete. Some of them are probably just pipe dreams, but it was putting it all down on paper with the risks and rewards of each one. That's where the next step, once, the way I see it, once we have the strategy, then we can start dissecting these apart, going, right, what do we need? What do we need to repay the debt for the airport? What do we need to operate? How much do we need to operate? Because each situation will be different too. What we could find is that we have very limited on airport, like active aviation. We have an aero club and a helicopter firm and, you know, some privates, but we're bringing the bulk of the money in from any development around the outside. So what are our financial needs for an airport then? A lot less than if we were very aviation centric in the operational area. So yeah, like you'll see the risk matrix I put in there. One of the columns is facilitator or enabler. You know, if we are the facilitator, it's got a red square because it's big investment, but there's some good ideas there. You know, how do we sort out which is the better idea? Where do we start? That basically, to me, that's the start there. Once we and with discussions we have with people in different industries as well. So, yeah.
Just to follow up on that, one of the points that you raised on there, one of the opportunities I noticed was a solar farm, effectively, and dovetailing nicely in from the electric autonomous planes or delivery vehicles, whatever you'd like to call them, the ability to effectively supplement the income by generating electricity or have a gentailer or whatever base there that can do that actually means another opportunity to leverage. That's the kind of interconnected thing that you're looking at. Is that right?
Yeah, look, the more that the airport can be self-sufficient, self-funding, the better, because again, it's less on the ratepayer. Also, depending, so take solar for example. There's two ways to do it. You go into an agreement with someone and you lease them the land, and they generate they put the infrastructure and they generate electricity. So your return on that is just lease land rate. If you were to take Christchurch Airport for example, where you put the infrastructure in, you are now the retailer, But the other side of that is there's a restriction, and as we go further and we look into business cases, we'll look at these issues of can the network handle what we could generate. Ideally, I'd love to put 200 hectares of solar in there and have it farmable, grazable at the same time, which can be done. But can the network take the 200 hectares of power it's generating? So if not, what can we use on site? And then what else can we put back into the community as well? So it's not just about selling it to the retailer. Is there something we can do for the community with that power generation? So, yeah, again, deep details that will come out with a business case or a feasibility study on it.
Yeah, I flew over the Christchurch installation last week, and it is incredibly impressive. Thousands and thousands of panels. It just shows what can be done. Thanks, Matt.
Right, now I've got quite a list of speakers. I've got Councillor McCone, Councillor Fanini Ta'iti, Councillor Flack, then Councillor Hopkins.
Well, thank you for this, Matt. There's been a lot of work going there. I'm probably one of the few in this room that remembers walking up the uphill of the DC3 as it left with NAC. That's a while ago, but that's what they used to do every 7 a.m. in the morning and 7 a.m. at night, 7 p.m. at night. There was also a Bristol freighter there that took on freight and took on eggs and flowers and everything else, and that came in daily as well. So the opportunities are there. We've just got to get some of those back. I totally agree with you that it's a strategic spot out there. We're very fortunate that we've got a secondary income really that subsidises the airport, which is unique probably to a lot of airports in the South Island. We have another stream of source of income. But I would like to reiterate, and I know you've left out for a reason, but to give a strategic direction, we need to see the finances. So all the time I've been sitting here, I've only seen one set of accounts, and they were 2 years old at the time. So I have no idea what's going where, what's owed, what's debt, what's everything else, and income. So yes, I think this is an excellent idea. The only thing I could see in it that needed probably to be fixed up was an airport board comprising of 2 members and 1 elected member. I would say 2 elected members, and the reason for that is that you have continuity. So if one's not there, you've still got someone there. And secondly, elections change people pretty quickly, and people move also as far as the leadership team can be moved around or whatever's going on. So at least you have continuity and realism somewhere in that thing that will continue rather than have to stop and start all over again. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, look, that's what today's about is fleshing this out. So I'm happy if everyone sort of agrees to change that. The other point on the finances, another deliberate move not to put them in, and I'm happy to we can have another workshop. We can send it via email, whatever. What I found when I first started, I read the strategic plan and the business case from previously done, and I noticed they were out of date straight away. All right, so this here has been written as a document that's standalone, irrespective of time. What we can do is appendix on the side, the finances, the plans, and stuff like that, so it doesn't affect this document. Otherwise, that was written in 2023, I think. So 3 years down the track, it's out of date. Again, because aviation's so volatile, things change so quick. There's money down the drain. So the intent of this document is to be a standalone document and live through the ups and downs of things, of world events.
Thank you. Councillor Fanini Ta'iti.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Matt, for this documentation. I was quite interested in reading about the different opportunities that were in the paper that you provided, and it was probably what I was asking for that last visit to the airport. So thank you for providing that. I'm just wondering, I'm very supportive, of the commerciality and the opportunities that it presents. How do we retain and protect the community kind of led organizations that are operating out of there to kind of help anchor, like and protect that, like the Aero, like club and things like that. Like I think they're still quite important to retain. So on the one hand, how do we kind of protect that community-led kind of activity that's out there and other community initiatives that I can see are held out at the airport while we still kind of balance the commerciality side? That's probably my first question. And then the other one was just comments about the governance and the operating model. I can see there's lots of different tiers. Do you think that's going to be a wee bit too bureaucratic or too slow, like for things to be able to move? It was just an interesting diagram, but I understand, like that it's needed, but I'm just mindful of the pace, like of some of the work that and decision making that needs to be done.
So that was the intention of the airport board. I'd say 2 elected and 2 executive members. With a delegation decided by yourselves, whether it be financial or just a delegation, so we can react quickly to commercial decisions. There might be an opportunity that comes up that we can sign a 25-year lease for $200,000. All right. I don't want to be running up here every 5 minutes asking for a decision from full council, and I don't want to get tied into dropping through all these other committees to get to council when that could take 4 or 5 months sometimes. We need to be able to react fast. There will be a certain above that delegation where it, right, $1 million lease for 40 years, that needs to come to council, fully understand that with a full, but that board will also be the ones that vet or filter through, this needs to go to council or you're missing this. And, so it's kind of like that first backstop, so to speak. There's another group I mentioned as well, which is like a working group. Now that group there is made up of, that's a non-decision making group. That is a group made up, while we're developing this, of 3 officers from the council and some outside business expertise. We can't do this on our own. I don't pertain to know everything, but we have certain people we were hoping to bring on board to give us that business sense, that sense check of whether or not ideas would float, whether they'd work in the community or not. So it's about involving everyone, not just siloed in-house making decisions ourselves. So while it may seem quite complex, they kind of very often different directions. Does that answer?
And my question about the community side, how do we protect, like the activity that's happening out there and the revenue that's generated from this? How can it help support that type of activity?
Yeah, well, that comes down to how we deal with the finances, because obviously there's certain, it's ring fenced at the moment. So, and I know I haven't researched into it, but the reserves, making money off a reserve. Look, yeah, it's a valid point. We need to probably document. I suppose it's just given that aero clubs will always be there and always have their space, but yeah, we can put something in there for that.
Councillor Schlack.
Yes, thanks, Matt, for putting all this work in there. A couple of things in no particular order, actually. But first of all, a general one, Mayor and everybody else. Sven has excused himself for this, and we all understand why. However, he does represent a lot of experience and knowledge around that airport. And I just wonder whether it's worthwhile going forward with this, whether his involvement, even if it is ring fenced around certain things. Because after all, we've got a council here that represents a great deal of experience in a very variety range. And I would hate to see his experience and knowledge about the workings of the airport being lost to us, to be honest. And no decision has to be made that, but I thought I would just make that comment.
I guess I'll just respond to that before you carry on. And that is sitting around, there's a whole lot of opportunities here. And obviously he is a business owner in that space who probably has his own personal opportunities. So I think it's really important that we keep this really, really clear on where the conversations lie and where the decision-making lies, and that's got to sit probably outside of where Councillor Felning is. But it doesn't mean that Councillor Felning can't actually provide some input along the way. But when it comes to any decision-making portion, I think we need to just have really clear conflict discussions and just be clear on how we're going to manage them. And that's up to him as well, personally, on how he manages that conflict.
Absolutely, no argument from me. I just wanted to raise the point. Matt, well, first of all, express my opinion about the airport and a commercial strategy, what this is about. In my view, we have an established, significant, unique asset here that I think needs to be explored commercially as much as possible. And I take your strategy document there in that as and are generally very positive. I'm not going to nitpick. I've got 36 comments in it, but this is about strategy and direction. I just want to pick up on the finances and the information that really should be coming to us. I think it is important because, as John or Councillor McCowan has mentioned, the finances and a view on that will demonstrate if it's actually financially achievable. To put it bluntly, we need to know how big the hole is that we know that we have to crawl out. Are we talking about tiny little businesses or organizations or commercial opportunities, or do we have to look for big stuff? So I think that is important, that is brought to us. As far as the airport board is concerned, I agree with Councillor McGowan. It should have 2 elected members in there as well. I don't think 1 is enough. And in terms of the delegations, I think this goes a little bit further beyond what you're trying to do here, personally, I think. I think those delegations can be determined and probably needs to be discussed a bit further. I wouldn't want to commit to that. Now, I want to say that I have witnessed firsthand living in an area that an airport, a major airport, where there was nothing, and have seen it grow. And it still amazes me to this day, was the variety of businesses, from just offices where people work out of, to recycle centres, to service stations, to, I've just seen it explode over a number of years. So to me, there is no limit what you can do there, as long as you got, as you rightly point out in your document, you have got free flat land. And I think, put that together, that is industrial land for that matter, industrial zoned. So I think that just creates a great opportunity. You've put a lot of opportunities there. However, the one that I really was missing in that, and take it as constructive criticism, is what unique opportunities would we have with our airport that other airports do not have? And I don't have the answer for that, because you're far closer to that, and Sven probably, that can answer that. But I think that is what I would be looking for. What makes us unique? Because after all, everything else, pretty much everything else that is proposed here, can also be done by other airports. What's the point in duplication? We need to find something that is unique, that attracts investors here. Sorry, am I okay to keep going, Madam Chair?
Within reason.
I'll just, all right, well, I'll just get a few things off my chest here. Page 5. Did you say something facetious there? No? Okay. Page 5 on infrastructure, on first paragraph, no, on the infrastructure and investment project, you say stage investment approach. Can you just expand a little on that? Because my comment on this was, now I'd rather prefer a multi-directional approach, very wide, as in not focus on one particular thing. So perhaps I read it wrong. So maybe you can just expand a bit on the term stage investment approach. Thanks.
Okay, I'll go back one of your questions prior first. So Shelley and I have been actively involved in a lot of conversations about some unique ideas. There's some things that we've pigeonholed as industrial or commercial or processing, but haven't gone into detail at the moment because obviously there's conversations going on. But we've had some very good interactions with outside agencies outside of Waitaki about what Waitaki could and Oamaru Airport could provide for these people. And we do have some conversations coming up on that as well. So yeah, we are looking for that out of the box, idea that is unique. So yeah, totally agree with what you're saying there. Staged approach means more probably about what we can afford and when we can do it. The other thing is we don't want to flood the place all at once. There's multiple different ideas that could be investigated and actioned at the one time. But the idea was, and would come in the master plan stage, you'll see we'll do staged investment. This document is not a 5-minute document. It's not a 5-year document. It's a 30-year document. So this is mapping out what we can potentially do and how we achieve it over the next 30 years. So, if you want it all done at once, write the check, we'll go for it, but I'm aware that won't happen. So, it might be that we open up 30 hectares first, and that's the first stage. Second stage would be another 50-hectare block, or stage 2 would be the solar farm, or so on and so on. So that's what we mean by a staged approach. Walking before we run, basically.
Yeah. I'll just pass to Mr. Palmley.
I just wanted to comment on the financial, the desire to see the finances, and clearly the finances are important, and this strategy is aimed at changing the financial position of the airport in relation to council. I just wanted to say a couple of things in relation to that. We need to make space for having strategic discussions, and I think sometimes if we provide lots and lots of detail, we don't get the strategic discussion, we get a more micro discussion. And in this context, this is a first discussion on this, not the last discussion. And Matt and Joe needed to test out, is this thinking about right and where you want to head? That then leads to the next stage, being able to do the master planning and the business planning, and having what that means in terms of the current financial position and where we might be able to get the finances to. So I think it's not that we're trying to keep finances from you, it's about creating the space where we can have a strategic discussion that then enables that more detailed discussion on master planning, business planning, and what it means for the finances compared to where we are currently.
Yeah, no, I take that on board. Again, it's just basically constructive criticism or not even criticism, actually. It's basically a point I raised for an expert, right? Yeah, I don't expect Matt to pull this out of his head here and there.
All right, so I've got quite a few waiting to speak. Got Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Holden, Councillor Cowles, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and Councillor Lewis. Use your mic, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dale. I have a number of questions. First of them, well, it's more a comment than a question. Matt, you said before that some of these proposals at the moment are just pipe dreams. I would submit that, in fact, at the stage they are at the moment, they're all pipe dreams. There's no proposal as to how they will be advanced, what the strategy will be, and neither have we identified any actual or potential partners. So beyond these being possibilities, some of which, like drones and aerospace and limited domestic services, have been tried previously and proved unsuccessful. That's basically where we're at. My question, or two questions, arise out of that. the glaring omission for me in the document is any reference to NZAA. Page 3 says the draft plan outlines a more commercially focused approach to the airport. We've actually had that since we agreed to allow them to come here, leaving the Matamata airfield.
If I just, I want to respond to that because that is quite challenging. We haven't named any airport user in this, and I think that's important when we're having a strategic conversation around the NZAA. What we're saying is not that it hasn't had any kind of commercial approach, but we have invested and we continue to invest ratepayers funding into the airport to prop the airport up. And that needs to be acknowledged, because while you're investing ratepayer money into our airport to keep it running, you are not being commercial because you are costing your ratepayer to do that. So the discussion isn't on who that person is or isn't, who the organisation is. The conversation today is, do we want a commercial approach? If you believe ultimately that we as we need to use ratepayers' money to basically hold up opportunities at our airport, and we're happy to invest ratepayers' money into that, that's a different strategy, and that's a conversation we can have when we land the strategy. But there's a reason, first of all, there's no individual companies in there because this is not a conversation about individual companies. But we've got a strategic discussion, and we've had this in front of council a number of times, but we haven't actually enacted it, of do we want to be commercial, or do we see there being a role for council in investing ratepayers' money into making the airport viable so that we can hold on to wider economic benefits. And that's a very valid argument.
Yes.
But it's a conversation we're having today. So I want to say, please keep individual ones out of it. And if you have a different approach you want to see us take, certainly there is a place for that discussion. And at some stage we'll have a vote around that and we'll make a decision.
I was going to go on to say that one of the financial information provided to the last council demonstrated that the airport is actually now generating more of the income, the total income, or is generating more income in relation to the total costs. 28%, I think, of the profits or the proceeds of the airport reserve. That is to say, the local purpose airport reserve gazetted by the Crown on the 13th of November 2014, which I think included the dairy farms. So the airport had been generating probably less than 5%, I think 1 or 2% of its total income. It's now generating 28%. That's arguably still not enough, but it is more commercial. And there are references here. I have basically, if you like, two substantial further questions. On page 7, there's a reference to cross-subsidisation of aviation activities by farming revenue. Now, if, as I understand, the Crown, when it gazetted the local purpose airport reserve in 2014, included the dairy farms, it presumably did so in order to ensure that they provided an alternative or additional source of income. And that has been an intention, a deliberate intention, not an accidental cross-subsidisation from the outset. And the other question I would ask...
was that a question? Because you're right, and I think that's been acknowledged within the paper.
Well, the point is then, can we stop talking about the dairy farms cross-subsidising or providing transitional income for the airport? It was clear the Crown's intention when they gave us the whole infrastructure was that those two land uses would operate in harmony and in conjunction. And this appears to have been an understanding that officers no longer agree with. And yet I believe it's clear that that's the political intention. And we should stop talking about the dairy farms cross-subsidising. Now, the other question.
Can I-
let officers respond?
Okay.
Can I, yeah, because I'm losing track. First of all, you're right. It is all pipe dreams.
Yes.
When I'm not here today to have projects approved. I'm here what I'm here for today is the previous council agreed on a strategy but never signed it off. We all then came out to the airport and had a walk around and a discussion about where the go forward for the airport. This document here is about reaffirming what the discussions we've had is, right? At this stage, there is no signed resolution saying what we should do with that airport. I'm putting it in front of you to say, right, can we put a line in the sand, agree to something and move on? So you're right, it is all just pipe dreams.
Thank you, Mayor. Do officers accept the point I'm trying to make? That there's not some accidental or unintended cross-subsidisation of aviation activities by farming revenue. Rather, there is a very particular reserve with a very particular purpose and very particular requirements, which would probably preclude sale. But if they did, the proceeds would have to go to the airport anyway. But do officers accept that the fact, as they have acknowledged, that the local purpose airport reserve included from the moment it was gazetted, the airports, the dairy farms, that they are an integral part of the funding of the total reserve?
Now, Matt, I'll get you to turn your mic off for a second. I'm just going to take that from a governance point of view and then pass to Alex to talk. So essentially, this is what strategic discussions are.
Yes.
And so obviously there is a view raised, and what we do with the strategy and the direction that we send our staff on is ours to do. We can absolutely look at, here's the package, this is what the farms are earning, and it all goes to the airport, and then whatever's left over, do we have cost subsidy for ratepayers or not? There's a whole package of options in front of us, and as the elected members, we now need to send some directions to staff to say what we're comfortable with and what we're not. And that's what these discussions are about. So rather than challenging staff and saying, do you realise this and do you realise this? What we need to be doing as elected members is saying, I think that we should be using that money still as it was intended. And this is what I'm putting forward, because that's a governance discussion that we're having. Yes. And it's quite a valid discussion. And if you want to have that put on the table so we have a decision point at some stage, that's absolutely okay. But what staff are doing is putting through in front of us an opportunity to talk about it. Well, and we get that opportunity now.
I would politely argue that yes, we have some discretion, but only to the extent that the purpose of the local purpose airport reserve is identified in the New Zealand Reserves Act, because it's an act created under the New Zealand Reserves Act 1977, and it will stipulate what uses money can be put to. And I'm simply trying to say that I'm not sure that we have quite as much flexibility or discretion as to how we allocate income generated either by the airport or the dairy farms as we may wish. Now, if I may, but that is a question that can be answered by Mr. Palmer.
I will get Mr. Palmer, and that's fine. I guess the questions are fine. It's just about, staff aren't coming to us with a done deal. And if you want clarity on what the legislation is around it, absolutely. But I'll pass to Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, no, clearly the airport reserve provides for an apron of land around the operational airport activities, and on all airports need those. I think we can look into what the terms of the Act say, but clearly it was intended that the airport would need that land around it to operate safely, but also that it could be used for commercial activities. They probably had in mind dairy activity at that time. We can check out whether there's any restrictions on other activity. But the purpose of this is to, you are now the governors of the airport, and it's to seek your direction. Officers have not come here, with something that, that they have set in mind. They've come here for an open discussion on what are the, options and the possibilities there for you to be able to set the direction. So I think it's unfortunate, that some things are being put in accusatorial terms when actually we're here to have a discussion so that you can set the direction, so that then, the officers can go away and start to operationalise that in the form of master plans and business plans for the airport to bring back to you.
Well, I haven't accused anyone of anything.
No, that's fine. Can we
I've
just,
simply
next
asked.
question, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Perhaps again, this might be deemed to be a bit more confrontational. I'm just curious to know why officers appear to be so focused on requiring the airport to pay 100% of its costs when we have a whole range of other facilities, the sports and event centre, the aquatic centre, the gallery, the museum, the opera house, and we're not actually saying to any of them, even to ourselves, they've got to wash their face. You look at the budgets for the opera house. I won't say them because you'll get cross with me. But if you look at the amount of money provided by ratepayers annually for the opera house, other than what it generates, it is massively greater than the airport. So why the focus on this one facility when I would argue that even if we looked at the finances, it is more important to prioritise others?
And I think that's a debate and a conversation we need to have, and it's quite valid. And so it's not that officers are fixated on this, it's that in the initial discussions that we've started to have, we have indicated we would like the airport to be more commercial. So if that's not where the end up discussion lies, that's absolutely fine, because that's our prerogative. Around things like the event centre, the opera house, there's a really wide community benefit. So it is looking at, and everyone's going to take that differently, whether or not support that ends up being in a roundabout way, support for individual businesses may be looked at differently. But these are conversations we need to have. There's no black and white in all this, because they are really intricate. So it's not staff saying, hey, we want to do this. It's saying, we've heard this from you guys in our initial discussions, which we've had at a high level strategically with our CE and the senior management team. And we've said, we haven't landed our strategy yet, but this is the direction we're going, and we need to find different ways of funding things that council does, because the rates aren't sustainable. And that is part of that. But when the rubber hits the road and the conversation comes down to our strategies in areas like the airport, and we say, hey, we've told you to be strategic, to be more commercial, this is the outcome, and these are the discussions that we need to have, and then what we decide. If we are comfortable that there is an good argument for a level of ratepayer funds to go into that, then that's what happens.
Yeah, okay. My comment, Councillor Slack made a couple of comments. I would simply say, again, without mentioning specific entities, if we want to have a more commercially focused approach to the airport, we would have a more commercially focused approach to the commercial clients who have generated more income and activity out there.
Thank you. Appreciate your input. Now we've got very little time, so I'm just recognising we've used up a whole lot of it, but we've got Councillor Holden, Councillor Cowles, Deputy Ryan, Councillor Lewis and McCone. I don't know that we're going to get through all that. I'm going to pull a hold to things at 10 past, and we will come up with a bit of what we'd get out of this. So we'll see how far we go. Councillor Holden.
Oh, so it might have been traversed. But as are you saying today, come just looking at more of the governance structure, but then not really for more investment, but then under the implementation plan, there's a whole lot of sort of investment things over the next 2 years. So just trying to get confused about that.
So I'm basically looking for the agreement that we want a strategy going forward and how we're going to work that. I will come back at a later date with all the business cases and the next steps master plan. So you go, yep, we want you to go ahead and have a commercial approach to it. Okay, cool. Then we come back after we've done some feasibility, sort of looked into some ideas, mapped out what the future of the airport may look like with more concrete certainty and some facts and figures and numbers behind it. Then we sit down again and go, right, this is where we believe from your direction it could head. Do you want us to proceed? Like, we're not rushing off here and doing everything overnight.
Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this short. Yep, look, I tend to agree with what's been discussed by others around structure. If we could have a couple of elected members, would be great. And I know at some stage, and now's not the time for it, is we need a starting point for financials, but focusing on that right now without a future is kind of fruitless. I know we're talking about Councillor Founding's participation, which I see, you're talking about a steering group. It'd be a great place for him, and he can clearly manage the conflict around the table. But I think if we look historically at where we were, I'm all for the idea of a board and a structure of an area that should be commercial. We're wanting to act more commercially as a council, and setting that up and allowing that to happen for me is a no-brainer. And the other thing that we haven't had in the past, and I feel that we're overlooking it, as your experience. You've done this before. You're coming to us with airport knowledge, the reason that we brought you on board and employed you in the first place. And I think along those lines, we have to put that in your hands and make sure that we've got a structure around it of reporting and those sorts of things that come back to us and that we're comfortable with. But what I'm seeing here, congratulations, and thanks very much for bringing it to us.
Thank you. And I guess, just want to echo Councillor Cowles' comments there. Like, you are a great asset to the council, and we really should be harnessing that. I guess, given that this is the opportunity for us to be giving our thoughts and direction, and you're right, we could spend a lot of time talking about airport finances, but if we are looking at the strategy itself, the rationale in the document is for a commercial model is because of the financial position that we're in now. So before we go any further, I think for me personally, I need a much clearer understanding of the actual financial position and what the new baseline is without NZAA. Because I guess it's difficult to assess, whether the issue is the airport's business model or the way costs are being allocated or different organisations taking it up. And I think that assessment is a huge focus in all areas of the business that we're talking about right now, especially. And, it's talking about operating surplus, but we're not talking about whether, outcomes could be achieved by reducing expenditure, rather than, and sort of weighing all that up. We would really like to understand that ring fencing and how that works before we're talking about how we're using that money. So to Councillor Hopkins' point, we're talking about the strategy that farming revenue is currently the stable revenue base, and the scoring matrix, shows that as a strong and low risk option, but it's almost framed in the strategy as a weakness rather than a potential strength. Like, I think there's lots of airports that would love to have a reliable 6-figure, revenue stream that don't have that. So I think we could kind of be thinking about that in different ways. And to Franz's point on our unique advantages here, the airport, I feel like it's one of its competitive advantages, exactly kind of what it's being treated as a constraint in the strategy, where we are small, uncongested and cheap to operate. So like, are there opportunities to kind of lean into that a little bit more? And I guess the other question that I had was, if we're looking at, there's a few opportunities in here looking at the potentially compete with what, like the industrial business park in Oamaru was started for. So that's what I kind of want to understand a bit more about, what that looks like. So thank you. That's all.
Yeah, just on that last point, internal discussions we already had is we are not competing with in here. It's different activities, that you probably don't want close to town or something like that. So,
Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Matt Tavendale, through the chair. Thanks, Matt. Since you've been there, I think the game has literally been stepped up, and very grateful for that. Just a couple of quick things. I had highlighted previously the balance with regards to the board, and I think more elected members was something that I felt we needed. Just with regards to, I'm trying to get the thing screened up, the development panel. Do you see that as being an ongoing thing, or just an initial stand-up part of the structure?
Probably the stand-up part of the structure, but it probably might go on for a while. To us, it's about getting external business-orientated people sense check what we're coming up with. You're mad to do that. Like this one, they'll know details, we don't. It's about using that panel to go, right, these are the products that you have in this district. How can aviation support it? You know, one of the at Oamaru Airport, I was amazed at what went out of there. Perishable goods, you know, horse semen, bull semen, wool samples, milk samples, all got freighted out every single morning. Mount Cook salmon, when we raised the freight opportunity with them through Venture Timaru, they were prepared to change their production schedule to meet the flight schedule. Okay, so we've been I've had 3 phone calls already by people approaching and interested in setting up. One was a flying school, one was commercial business. You know, so there's interest there, and it's about using that development panel and their experience to go, what do you think? You know, how could we structure this right? How could we structure something that governance would be palatable to? So if you put this as a 30-year plan, I'd say that group will probably stick around for 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Final question, Councillor McCone.
Well, again, it's been, as Alex said right at the start, it's been something that's been sitting in the background that we've tried to run but know nothing about. Now we've got you, and that's excellent. So don't go anywhere. You've got a few jobs to do yet. It's a strategy. And so it's a proposal. I like the one with the board, which means that you'll get 2 or 3 people around the table or 4 people around the table and get something done. And it's a way forward. Perhaps that might be the first thing that's set up. And to me, a financial set of accounts would be good, but never forget that it is a commercial strategy. And I think it's excellent. Also, as far as cash flow goes, it might be called an airport, but it's got a huge tract of land with it that it creates investment around that. To me, that's still part of the airport, because to get development and to increase things, you need cash flow. And that cash flow can come out of there. You know, once everything gets stood up or your development keeps coming in the way it could, if there's a payout that needs to come back to the shareholder, which is us, then so be it. But at the moment, you can't cash strap anything that's trying to develop. So you use the cash flow you've got, because look, we can't give you any, but the cash flow that's there, use it. And I see there's just so many benefits here that are just so positive that we've finally got someone that can drive it, and I think it needs driven because the opportunities are huge. So thank you.
All right, so I'm going to try and land this. So if we go to page 4, I didn't even do that on purpose. Discussion points there around the strategic vision, and this is probably a tough one in the fact that workshops, we don't make any decisions, so we can't offer you a decision. And I think that just taking Councillor Hopkins' point around, you know, whether there is a role for things like a full commercial, or whether there's a ratepayer element to that we should be kind of building into the mix, needs to have a decision point and a discussion. So I probably want to raise that. But what I'm reading at the moment, and that's not telling you to go away and do anything different in that portion of it, but there needs to be a point when we do have it coming back to us that we have the ability to have that conversation. I think there's a few things. The financials were certainly a theme that came through. So I think when it comes to what we need to come back at some stage, it is essentially, you know, understanding the financials as much as anything through this, because I think that there is a wish to make sure we do. So it's our stewardship role in that space, and any specific information that might help us come to the point saying that we are comfortable with this approach. The next thing would be the airport board. So the governance and operating model there, and essentially adding 2 elected members rather than the 1. There seemed to be general consensus on that. So I'd recommend that goes into the plan. There is a ability for us to make a different decision if we want to, but I think there was general consensus there. Then around the farm cross subsidies, the ring fencing, and the information around reserves and use of revenue, I think there just needs to be a bit of understanding around what the rules are there, what we can and can't do, so that we can make sure what we're doing, everyone's comfortable in the governance sense, that our discussions are sending in the right direction before we find ourselves in problems. I don't know that there's anything else missed off that for a general direction. Councillor Hopkins.
There is one thing, and I think it's something that we'll have to decide amongst ourselves. The way Matthew was proposing the operation of the board, he seemed to be arguing that it should have be entitled to make decisions involving contracts and leases and so on, up to, I think you mentioned $150,000 or $250,000. Now, my view is I don't want to actually cede that responsibility to two elected members. And in my opinion, it is as easy to convene an extraordinary meeting of a relevant committee or the full council as it would be the board. And I would argue quite vehemently that decisions of that nature should be made by a larger group of elected members than just two.
I guess it probably rolls back to our procurement policy and what is available within the procurement policy. Whether there's a threshold outside of that needs to be brought to us. And I must admit, when I heard you sort of talk about the longevity, I wonder where there's a point where us tying up a certain amount of land needs to have a full council decision on it before it's done. So it's probably just a bit of a teasing out to happen in that space, so we understand what we're agreeing to, if you will. So because obviously these are longer term decisions, and if you want to offer surety to someone that you're signing a lease with, if it's signing up for 30 years, there might be some pushback. So it's kind of working out where that line lies. So that's probably a clarification to come through, and just taking a note on that. If there is an expectation that maybe that committee can make some decisions around some finances to a point, just being really clear on what that point is, and we can have that discussion around that and find what level. But if it lines up quite clearly with our procurement policy too, there's a wee bit in there that's a given already, and then it's if there's anything outside of that, I think that's fair. Are you getting everything you need from us?
I suppose out of this is, there's been a lot of questions fired to me. But as I said at the beginning, I need to know what you want. So which way do you want to see that board structured? What suits you? There's no point in me keep coming up with ideas all the time, keep coming back, keep getting knocked down, So I'm happy to take on any of this document, any correspondence via Joe, any ideas and suggestions for it. Because as I said, we're working together on this to create something. The crux of it comes down to, we could land that the farm is the best revenue stream for that airport. I'm not saying we have to go any other way. What we're looking at is here, are we getting the best return?
Yep.
And that's all we're asking.
So I think there's probably just a wee bit more understanding that councillors want around that kind of thing, and the finances in general. So we just understand how it all pieces together and what we're talking about in that space. So perhaps there's a portion that comes back to us in that sense, just to build our understanding of how it all fits together and works. And then we'll probably be able to offer a lot clearer guidance. But I think for now, outside of adding the elected member and the financial and wanting to understand the cross subsidising side of things, there's a level of comfort, but there still needs to be a decision point in there somewhere. So I would suggest, and I'm certainly willing to be challenged on this, that we're heading in the right direction in the discussion that's got some general support. So I wouldn't suggest trying to change everything, but there's always a decision point when we will battle it out, if you will, in the chamber here and land on a decision that will offer you that clarity you're looking for.
Can I just clarify then? So this is currently scheduled for your 23rd of June meeting. Are you wanting another workshop before then, or would you want that to come forward with the financials in that report so that you could get on and make a decision?
I feel like we need a workshop before then, because I do think that there needs to be a good understanding, and I don't think that in that meeting, when we're trying to land the strategy, is the right place to have that, because I think then you will find that the conversation becomes less strategic and gets confused. So I think if we have an opportunity to build councillors' understanding of all the intricacies in between, then I think that that would help. And so I guess the conversation to be had then is whether or not in our ridiculous calendar we can fit that in, or whether we have to do a push out. So that's probably a conversation for us to take offline. Is everyone comfortable with that? Thank you very much, Matt, for the work done in this space. And yeah, we'll see you back in front of us sometime soon. Right, is us done. Thank you everyone for joining us.